It all comes down to the Indiana Pacers and the Boston Celtics for the Eastern Conference, and thus far we have gotten two fairly competitive games that ultimately resulted in 2 wins at home for Boston, which many would have predicted either way, but while there aren't necessarily good losses in the playoffs, the Pacers got about as close to that as they could for not having home court advantage and for Boston being so heavily favored in this series. Hello everybody, welcome to Asa Rusty Buckets. If you are watching this on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe if you have not already. If you do end up enjoying this content, you can watch it through to see if you do, but I have a feeling you will. But also drop a like if you do like it, if you want this as an audio experience, or if you're just listening to this on Spotify already. First of all, thank you, because I would prefer a lot of you do that, not in general, but you know. If you like Spotify, if you have it, go check it out on Spotify. In the first quarter, Indiana would go down massively as the game started 14-2 in favor of the Celtics, and they got to that lead effortlessly at that. But soon, Indiana would find their groove on offense. Andrew Nembhard hit a big momentum catch-and-shoot 3 off of a pass from Hali, who was doubled by Boston's pair of all-defensive guards. Jaylen Brown started the game with 10 in the first, shooting 5 for 6 from the field, with his best move being a pump fake on the right corner of the paint, which got Myles Turner to jump just enough to float it in. Indiana responded to this poor start pretty damn well, but they were still clearly looking like the lesser team. However, then bWOWn checked into the game and he started cooking. Not with ISOs or anything like that. That's obviously not bWOWn's game. This was just pure off-ball dominance. He got a catch-and-shoot 3 at the top of the key off of a screen/pass from Pascal Siakam, which is an action you're seeing more and more in the NBA, I think. At least I'm recognizing it more and more. As well as a mid-range catch-and-shoot movement jumper, which isn't a shot you see a lot in the NBA anymore. Usually if it's a mid-range shot, it's off of the dribble or a catch-and-shoot like with a lot of space. A movement one's rarer and rarer these days. And he ended this quarter with about as easy of a shot as you'll see in the playoffs, with Siakam making a good read to find him under the basket as Jrue Holiday once again overhelped. Indiana managed to carry the momentum that they sparked in their original comeback in the first quarter, and they carried that over into the second, resulting in them tying it up at half at 64 apiece. Which, damn, might I say, that's a really high score. Not surprising that the Celtics scored that much, but I am surprised that the Pacers scored that much, just given that, yes, obviously they are like the best offense in the league. However, damn, Boston's defense is really not as good as it used to be when Porzingis is not there. One interesting thing that these two teams have in common is they really like sharing the pie. Everybody gets a piece of pie on the Pacers and the Celtics. They have an egalitarian approach. Egalitarian is your word of the day, kids. It just means that everybody is involved. For Indiana, this sharing the pie point is indeed true, but I don't know if the third quarter would necessarily be where I said they would do it the best, and that's really what separated them here for a bit. Aaron Nesmith had a really nice drive off of a Jalen Smith handoff into a double screen, which was certainly an impressive sequence for him, or at least I thought, because Rick Carlisle seemed to think very differently. He did not allow Jalen Smith to clock more, not even a minute. I think it was 58 seconds. He did not play his ass at all. And I feel like Jalen Smith was really good in the regular season. If you're a Pacers fan, could you tell me what the issue with him is that he doesn't play at all? I'm not saying he was a high minutes rotation player, but there has been some rotation stuff from the Pacers. We'll get into it, where I'm like, I'd rather see Jalen Smith than some of these guys right now. Moving on. Haliburton and Myles Turner combined for 20 points, and that's what kept them alive in this quarter, when that's not really normally their approach offensively, including this play where he's trailing behind the set, where Pascal ends up cutting down the middle to draw Turner's defender away, which left him wide open, about as wide open gets, and he nails it. It's small little nuances like that cut from Pascal that opens up Myles' shot. Like, that's playmaking, but you just can't, there's no stat for it. And that's the type of stuff that I really have appreciated, you know, attuning my eye for a little bit as I've tried to get a little bit more serious about my approach of watching basketball. If you can't tell by how much harder I'm trying on these videos these days. Myles would also set a ghost screen for Hali, and Kornet could not keep up with him on the roll, resulting in an easy dunk. But after 2 sick-ass plays in a row, they just leave Luke Cornet wide open for a dunk. Why? This game ended up going into overtime, and a turnover that Indiana had late allowed that to happen, and that was a very huge part of the discourse, and rightfully so. That's something that you should talk about, and we will talk about it. But I cannot emphasize enough that it is plays like this that can decide a game before we're even into the fourth quarter, before we're even into the next 3 quarters. You can have a play like this, or a sequence of plays like this, that you can play perfect for the rest of the game, but you have put yourself in too much of a hole when you're playing a really good team. This happened with Denver multiple times where they started the half, and especially the first quarter, very slow. They kind of start to find their groove halfway through the second quarter, and then they're great in the second half, but they had like a 8 to 15 point deficit because they didn't start well. Stuff like this. This game went into overtime. This is 2 points. If those 2 points were not counted, let's say Indiana gets a stop because they just did not defend this objectively very terribly. That kind of shit loses you the game. And that's the problem with Indiana, and that's why most people don't really think this team belongs in the Eastern Conference Finals. Not to be a hater, but like this kind of shit, it's why Indiana lost this game, because otherwise they should have won it. All of that said, Indiana should feel very good about how they are approaching this game thus far. They are going in with a tied game at half, and honestly, for what Boston's capable of, 64 isn't as bad as it could be to allow if you're Indiana, although I have felt like Indiana's defense has been better in the playoffs. I mean, everyone's defense gets better in the playoffs. I don't think that's a unique observation, but also like to a higher degree than other teams were capable of turning it up. Indiana was a pretty good defense like post All-Star break. I'm just saying not dog shit, which they had been otherwise. But their strategy of we can score more points than you even if we allow you to score a lot of points, I feel like it's better to do the reverse of that, like the we don't have to score as many points because we can stop you. This approach can theoretically work, and we have seen it win playoff games before at the very least. Maybe you don't win the war, but you can win the battle this way, and it's been working thus far. A Miles Turner pump fake got Derek White to step up to protect the rim, which left Nembhard wide open for 3. Halliburton made Peyton Pritchard look like a damn fool. Just insane manipulation from him, combining his handle with the initial screen. A pump fake, a give-and-go pass to the post to PascWOW, who immediately kicks it back to him. Another pump fake gets him just enough space to let the 3 fly, and it goes in. That is beautiful basketball. You know, lately I've been feeling like third quarters are kind of what decide these games. Like a lot of the times it's like the team, if they make a comeback in the third quarter, it can often be the spark that makes them win the game. That obviously is what we saw in Game 7 with the Nuggets versus the Timberwolves, which ironically I just said the reverse of that with the Nuggets being the huge problem, but actually in that game they were worse in the second half, so nice of them to mix things up with how they keep fucking up. I have a lot to say about Denver. That's coming in a future video. Pascal Siakam caught fire. He went 5 for 6 with 12 points. Jaylen Brown got Miles Turner with the same step-through move from earlier in the game, gaining even more separation this time. Turner and Tatum both somewhat took advantage of their size advantage in the post against guards, although Turner took a easier shot for sure. Either way, I think both teams take that over a layup, and I think that is an issue that these teams also share, which is just the lack of rim pressure. Turner got a better look, but like Tatum has who was on Tatum? I think it was a guard. I don't remember who it was. Either way, too small, and he takes this like deep fadeaway, and look, it goes in. It goes in, and I get it. Sometimes, I'm a Kobe fan, sometimes you have to take a crazy mid-range shot and have it go in so you feel sexy, and then you can play more confident from there. I understand that. I feel like you can punish the defense better. You know, the defense gets to stand there and watch that happen. You want to get them in rotation. You want to get them moving, and you're just standing there. It's the problem I often have with Boston's offense. Jrue Holiday has also been awesome in this game so far, with 18 points to this point on great splits, shooting 4 for 8 from outside, which is a bit of a high volume from him from outside, but ultimately they're shots you'd prefer Jrue take if you gotta choose, and he's hitting them right now. Luckily, Hali managed to make one real highlight play here, hitting a wild 3, contorting his body awkwardly to avoid Jaylen Brown, and it banked in, and then bounced off the rim, but then rimmed in, which is just crazy. Boston was up 4 points going into this fourth quarter. And this fourth quarter could really be the only one, at least in regulation, that you could define as a defensive quarter. Indiana managed to tie it up to send it into overtime, and that sounds great, but really it's more like Boston managed to tie it up because Indiana kind of had this one and blew it. Jrue and Tatum hit some tough mid-range shots. We got some white-on-white violence with McConnell beating Pritchard with a spin move. Pascal Siakam started the quarter hot, lacing 3 straight jumpers from roughly the same area on the floor. Al was dropping in the pick and roll, and Siakam would continuously make him pay for not stepping up. But he was the only one who had anything going for Indiana for basically the entire quarter, including getting a steal from Jaylen Brown, followed by an eventual slam on the break off of a Hali dime. Meanwhile, Jrue Holiday was the only player who had anything going for Boston. Both him and Pascal missed just 1 shot, but everybody else shot a combined 28% from the field for Boston, including Tatum going 2 for 7 from the field. But weirdly enough, Indiana scored just slightly less, so that means that Indiana had to have struggled from the field, right? Well, no, they shot 55% from the field in the quarter, which is remarkable for a conference finals fourth quarter. Like 55% shooting on paper seems great, but this is why 3-point shooting and free throw variance, just adding that mix of approaches and ways of scoring, is very important. That and rim pressure. But Boston got a few more field goal attempts as Indiana had more turnovers in this quarter and more offensive rebounds given up to Boston, so there was more field goal attempts, period. But also, they shot more 3-pointers. Indiana ended up hitting a bunch of middies in this one. I don't think it was necessarily by design, that's just the shots that they actually made. Andrew Nembhard, who somehow keeps finding himself in these situations where he needs to be a hero, and there's realistically no reason to believe he can do it, and then he does it. Frankly, that deep 3 he hit versus New York is probably the reason they're here to begin with, because I think they lose that series if they don't win that game. For some reason, Andrew Nembhard has turned into it's the last 5 minutes of the game, let's just throw the grenade to him and he has to get rid of it before it explodes. It's truly ridiculous, and he keeps doing it. And in this game, he was excellent. I'm honestly starting to reevaluate what I think his potential as a player is. In this one, he ended up cooking from mid-range as well, including 2 tough and timely mid-range pull-ups over Al Horford on the switch, one of them a step back, one of them a pull-up. To be completely real with you, Al kind of sucked in this game in a surprisingly noticeable way. Always just a little step slow on defense, especially by comparison to what we'd know him to be otherwise. And his threes that he's taking, Indiana seems entirely content with. I don't think he has the same level of shooting gravity that Porzingis does. Then again, his most important shot of the game was a 3-pointer that he hit, that being one of their 3 makes, which is only 2 more than Indiana, but it was enough to win the math game just slightly. Then we get a series of dumb turnovers, one of them canceling out the other, saving the Pacers from choking embarrassingly, but they just turn it over on the inbounds anyways. Pascal could not catch it as he was running to the ball. Even still, you just need a stop, and off of the inbound, you defend it perfectly. Pascal got caught on a screen for a second, but he fought through it and recovered well, but Jaylen Brown just hits the damn shot anyways, despite contorting his body weirdly on the shot just to get around Pascal to begin with. Ridiculous shot to send it into overtime. But that does mean we get free basketball, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing like free basketball. Was there another overtime game this year? I feel like in the playoffs, I might be stupid and I'm blanking on something I should otherwise know. It's definitely not happened a lot. Hali opened up overtime with a pull-up 3 over, you guessed it, Al Horford, who just had to have had a ridiculous opponent's field goal percentage in this one if I had to guess. To be fair, Tatum did die on this screen here, which did put Al on a bit of an island. JB would body Tyrese at the rim for 2, and then Tyrese would be fouled from behind on a 3-point attempt by Derek White, resulting in a 2-point lead from Indiana. But one of the worst things that could have happened to Indiana that also isn't really going to be treated as a significant excuse, but actually does really fucking matter, is that Aaron Nesmith got fouled out. Aaron Nesmith fouling out completely changed this game. And unfortunately, while I do think you can survive without him, I think Rick Carlisle made the wrong call for what to do in this situation, and it cost them the game. I would have put either Obi Toppin or maybe Isaiah Jackson in the game here to sub in for Nesmith. Toppin's not known as a defensive player. It's not something he's great at, but he is a big body, and this is the playoffs, and he's going to put in as much effort as he can. I'm sure of that. And he physically matches up much better against Tatum than TJ McConnell does. And that leaves either Andrew Nembhard or Tyrese Haliburton to guard Tatum. Nembhard is a really good defender, but he's still small, and Tatum can just shoot right over him. His release point is ridiculous. So Tatum immediately recognizes this mismatch. Nembhard is just the least bad of the three options. TJ McConnell was the only thing standing between him and the basket here, which is just absurd. TJ McConnell is shorter than me. I can't emphasize this enough to you. I am not that tall, but I am taller than TJ McConnell. Why the fuck is this guy in right now? Why? He got an easy and one out of it. I cut the clip up. I was actually kind of baffled by this decision. I first wrote this script and I performed it, and then the recording was corrupt. The more I thought about it after, what the hell was this decision? Why would you not put Obi Toppin in? He was on fire, and he's a way bigger body. How do you think you were gonna survive with three guards who are just not that scary of defensive opponents? At least against a 6'9" fucking shooting guard. From there, Tatum would again target the poor defense. Hali as a one-on-one matchup is just a complete joke, despite being the tallest of the three. Nembhard's too short. Tatum, his release point's too high, so he just takes a sidestep off a quick screen and he makes it look easy. They have two guards involved in this action and neither of them could get anywhere near that ball. God, they fucked up defending, and they also fucked up defending the inbounds as no one was standing in front of the basket because they were trying to get a steal. From there were some free throws, and Boston managed to narrowly escape a bad game one loss at home to a team that they probably have no good reason to lose to. All right, so my key takeaways from the Indiana Pacers. I think I need to preface this more likely than not. I'm not sure to what degree Tyrese Haliburton's injury is affecting him. I'm not sure how much this is actually affecting his play, but I gotta say, dude's been entirely unreliable for these entire playoffs. And that's kind of fucking nuts that I'm saying that the Pacers are in the conference finals with Tyrese Haliburton not having been good. So first things first, let me add, Pascal Siakam, we need to give that guy his flowers because he has been good for this entire playoffs, like good. He is averaging 22 points per game, 8 rebounds, and 4 assists, and he is shooting 55% from the field. He had 24 points in this one, 12 rebounds, 7 assists. That's just great. He's so good, and he has been so good, which has allowed Tyrese Haliburton to get away with being bad in a couple of games. Let me just read some of his box score stats to this point. Obviously, we know box score stats are not necessarily the indicator of everything, the end-all be-all, but, you know, if you shoot very bad, you can read that. That's obvious. So his first playoff game against Milwaukee, he had 9 points, and they lost that one. I believe, it's one of the two that they ended up losing. And the other one they lost, he had 16 points on 14 shots. 17 points on 16 shots in the closeout game. Didn't matter because Milwaukee was injured as hell. First game against the Knicks, he has 6 points and takes 6 shots. He then responds with 2 35 pieces, but then he has 20 points, which is cool. 13 points on good efficiency, which isn't the worst, but they lost the game by a lot, so maybe if he scored more, that would have been nice. 15 points is fine, but 10 points in game 2, which we're going to get to, not great. Now, he had 25 and 10 in this one, and his efficiency wasn't bad for the playoffs, that is. Respectable enough, shot well from 3 on very high volume, hit a lot of impressive threes in this one. Frankly, he hit more impressive threes than he missed a bunch of non-impressive threes. Ones that are just like, yeah, that's easy. He's gonna hit that. No, he's not. He's not gonna hit that. But the one that's like, oh man, he took that over 2 defenders off of a screen. He only had a split second to even get the ball up to begin with. Oh, it's cash. Oh, that's like so far beyond the arc. Oh, it's cash. Doesn't fucking matter. I'm not saying Tyrese Haliburton's bad, because if you look, his playoff stats are good. His playoff stats are objectively good. He's had a 16 assist game. He averages 19 points, 8 assists. His field goal percentage is good. His three-point percentage is good. His free throw percentage, although he is shooting 1.3 of them fuckers a game, which is crazy for your lead guard, and that's a huge problem for Indiana. Ultimately, he could be playing much worse. The fact that they've been this good while he is an 18-8 guy instead of the, what was he at the start of the season? Because he got hurt. Oh, how do I go back home? Yeah, overview. He got injured towards the end of the season, had a lot of DNPs, and then got a lot worse. But his stats to that point, 24 points, 13 assists, 1.2 steals, 50% from the field, 40% from three, 87% from the free throw line, getting 4 free throw attempts. 4. Still fucking nothing, really, but better than what they were doing before. But literally, 12.7 assists to 2.6 turnovers, 24 points per game on very close to 50, 40, 90. Ridiculous numbers. He got hurt and he hasn't been the same. So I gotta give him like a bit of a pass, but it's been a problem. It's been a real problem, and the fact that he can just consistently have these bad games on a whim and you can't really rely on him to consistently at least give you 20 and 8, it's more like Tyrese is boom or bust in these games, because as I mentioned, he has had these like 8-point games, right? But he's also had, 24 on 16 shots, good efficiency, 34 and 9 on 11 for 19 shooting, hit 7 of his 11 threes, 35 points on good shooting splits, 26 points in the final game against the New York Knicks where he shot 10 for 17 and 6 for 12 from 3. Like, he's having these good games in there. He is clearly displaying an ability to play good NBA basketball at an all-star level and replicate. He had 25 and 10 in this one, even when I'm complaining about his play, which tells you a lot, because that means that he kicked ass. I mean, he did play 40 minutes, which is the most he's played by far. He's also played less minutes than you would expect. In fact, I see total games where he is eclipsing 40 minutes. And in fact, he's not even really eclipsing 35 more often than not, barely 33. He's playing 34 and a half minutes per game. He's playing 2.6 more minutes than he did in the regular season. That is not nearly as burdensome as you would typically expect for a lead guard. So I'm saying all of this not necessarily to slander him, because we all understand, first of all, born the same day, so I sometimes look at him and I'm like, yeah, me and that guy have had the exact same amount of time. I try not to think too hard about what I have done with that time and what he has. But that aside, I like Tyrese Haliburton a lot. If he was better, I would actually maybe believe Indiana has a shot here. But the fact that he had that bad game too, and the fact that he was great in portions of this game and terrible in others, made a lot of huge mistakes. Now, Indiana was only in this one because he was good, so like obviously he's still more of a positive than a negative. That's something I think a lot of people don't understand about criticism, is I'm like, yeah, the Tyrese Haliburton's too good to be a negative player more often than not. Obviously, they're better with him than without him, even if he is playing mildly injured, but this inconsistency makes it very hard to bet on them. And they have only, I think most Indiana Pacers fans, or at least I would think, and at least the ones I have seen on Twitter, would admit that injuries played a very large part in the fact they're here. Like, I think almost everybody thinks reasonably that Milwaukee beats Indiana if Giannis is healthy and Dame is healthy, and the fact that they were still competitive without him is a good indicator of that. Same goes for New York with how many people they had missing. Boston is missing Kristaps Porzingis, but I don't think they're going to lose this one. Indiana's kind of out of their depth in that they don't really belong in the conference finals, if we're being honest. This is an even more extreme version of the Atlanta Hawks, because at least the Atlanta Hawks actually did play great basketball, like great basketball, not just basketball that was good enough to beat a hobbled opponent. And that's more how I'm feeling about Indiana. Like, even though they are in the conference finals, I think everybody agrees, frankly, easily the worst team of the 4. And if Tyrese was better, maybe we could bridge that gap a little bit more. Luckily Pascal Siakam has been really good. He's had a lot of great games himself. The difference really is that Siakam's either having a great game or a solid game, whereas Tyrese Haliburton's either having a great game or a terrible game. And it's nice to at least reliably have the solid game. And if both of them could reliably have that, the ceiling for this team is much higher. Again, I don't know how much injury is affecting it, but I've seen him play good enough that I at least feel like it's enough of a thing potentially within him that could go beyond the injury. Of course, that's only speculative. And anytime I criticize an NBA player, just bear in mind that I am just a guy on a couch, and I am well aware of that. I just like talking about this shit with people. I know that's hard to believe. A lot of people think I'm a goddamn expert. I just have a camera and I yap. That's what I do. Should have played Obi Toppin more. I kind of talked about Tyrese for a very long time there. I didn't mean for it to go that long, but should have played Obi more. I think in general, Isaiah Jackson should play more, especially given how important defense is, especially, like, look, Isaiah Jackson, probably worse player than TJ is right now, and it makes sense that the rotation has prioritized TJ over him. However, from a defensive perspective at the end of that game, if Isaiah Jackson was in there, I think you win the game genuinely, because it doesn't allow Tatum to go to work and just get easy looks like that 3-point pull-up and one layup that he got. That is a 6-point swing that I think you could have avoided entirely. I'm not saying Tatum can't hit that shot if instead of like TJ, I can't remember if it was TJ, Nembhard, or Hali. It was one of the three who set the screen for that pull-up three or sidestep three, whatever it was. If that was Isaiah Jackson, not saying he doesn't hit the shot, because Jason Tatum can hit that shot over anybody, even with a good contest. But in this case, would have fucking helped. Would have dramatically increased the odds. Like, you took that shit from like a 5% contested to a 35% contested, and you can hit a 35% contested sometimes, but it's a lot harder and the odds are low. Even with all these criticisms for Indiana, I'm mostly this harsh given that they had this game in the bag. You don't want to lose a game like this when you could have won it, because winning this game at home, or not at home rather, against a team that you are heavily favored to lose to, I guess favored to lose, heavily favored against. A lot of their infrastructure stuff, a lot of their play style ultimately was their undoing here. Free throws. Boston ended up taking 20 more free throws, and you can cope with that if you want and sit here and just have the most, this is what my issue with free throws, you can sit here and have the most unnuanced conversation as you want, and you can just bitch about the free throw disparity and act as though that's just a matter of, you know, the ref's bias. But in reality, some teams do better jobs at getting to the free throw line than others. Boston isn't necessarily a great free throw shooting team, not in percentage, I just mean in terms of volume. But even with them taking 20 more free throws, they didn't take a ridiculous amount of free throws. Indiana just took a ridiculous lack of free throws. And no, it's not because Boston was getting away with foul calls or non-foul calls. It was because Indiana didn't put themselves in positions to get fouls. I have heard criticism before, like, don't encourage free throw merchant basketball or whatever. But in truth, in the history of this game, free throws matter. Hitting your free throws matter. It is a free opportunity to get points. And if you can generate more of those free opportunities, you inherently have a leg up. Now, I do think that it is anti-basketball to jump into your defender and shit like that. You know, trying to draw fouls or at least have an offense capable of it is not necessarily a matter of forcing it. Literally just having a downhill presence, having a paint presence, you know, forcing the defense to move more, forcing the defense to make more mistakes, not taking the first available shot, but instead looking for the biggest advantage that can get you fouled because that's the only opportunity they have to stop you, period. You know, if they get a switch, they have to foul you. There you go. That's how you get free throws. Like a switch that you can just dominate. Like if PascWOW switched on to Aaron Nesmith, not Aaron Nesmith, that's his teammate, Peyton Pritchard. I don't know why. Those names are entirely different, but they're also the same to me. That doesn't make sense. Peyton Pritchard, if that switch happens, they're probably going to either foul him or he's going to get an open opportunity for one of his teammates. And either way, that's good. I think they need to try to force switches more to generate those shots or generate those free throws. And I think they need to attack the basket more. And Tyrese, even when he's at his best, he's not a strong driver by any means. It's not his strong suit, but he's good. He's good at this aspect of the game. He can do it well, but sometimes he just doesn't. And this was a game where he dominated with his jump shot, and that's cool. It's nice. He ultimately, again, is the reason they hung in there. But damn, if they just put more pressure on the rim, they win that fourth quarter quite easily. They also had too many fucking turnovers, and turnovers is something that I am kind of up in the air on as to whether or not they really matter, because historically we've had so many examples of guys who like dominate in the assist to turnover category. How many of those guys actually end up winning championships though? How many teams that dominate in that category end up winning championships though? it doesn't seem like there's much of a correlation. It's more important that you hit your shots and you play good defense. The turnovers is a variable that more or less is going to be controlled and within a reasonable enough margin. Like, usually you're not going to have way more turnovers than the other team, but Indiana had 50% more because Boston had 14, which is high. I think 14 is still even a little bit high, but it's not crazy high. 21 is high, especially given how many of these were bad turnovers. Also, if we're just talking about the math of the game as it relates to free throws, mathematically speaking, Boston also got the marginally higher score because of three-pointers, because they were hitting just a few more. And again, they didn't shoot good. It's not a matter of shooting good necessarily. Boston hitting the same, with less shots, lower percentage. They got more shots, they shot a lower percentage from the field, but they ultimately score all the same because free throws and because three-pointers. And this is not anti-mid-range. I think mid-range is literally my favorite aspect of the sport, but I don't know. It was either mid-range or like really desperation threes, like, damn, you guys couldn't generate a better open look than that, because that shit wasn't open. I shouldn't even call it an open look. They were really sloppy. It went into overtime because it was sloppy. That sloppiness, I don't like how much I'm saying the word sloppy, translated to the next quarter or the overtime, and they lost. Also, 13-30 advantage for them in bench points with Toppin and McConnell both having good games. That's something you can bank on. You can hopefully win the depth battle, but you also got to use that depth and use it properly. Rick Carlisle, I'm not going to be too hard on him about it, but that was why they lost the game. It was over. It genuinely was. I was like, oh, so the game's done then. That's what we're doing? We're putting a 6-foot guy in the game in exchange for like the 6'5", super strong, really good wing defender, like not quite all defense, but very good defender guy. TJ McConnell's kind of a good defender for being 6 feet tall, but at the end of the day, being 6 foot tall is being 6 foot tall. The other day when I was playing pickup, the bitch about being tall is that if there's a really fucking tall guy and you're the only tall guy on your team, you have to defend the really fucking tall guy. It's bullshit. But I had to defend this 6'8" dude with like a lights out jumper the other day, and I was like, well, that's fucked. That shouldn't be allowed. I think I played good defense, but he's bigger than me. Anyways, my key takeaways for the Boston Celtics. This team really needs Kristaps Porzingis. I don't really think there's any shot in hell that they win against any team in the finals if they do not have him, and I mean that very genuinely. That's just not going to happen if he's not there. I don't know the exact timeline of his return, but if he's just not going to return, or if he does and he gets hurt again, or if he does and he's very bad, that spells doom for this team. I think both Dallas and Minnesota would have a better shot. Oh man, I love saying, I just realized that like Luka or Anthony Edwards has a real shot at winning a championship, and at the very least one of them is going to the finals, and that just makes my heart happy. I love both of those dudes, but that's unrelated. Al Horford was very bad in this one, and I don't think he can handle the playoff high minutes shit anymore. I think he's more than capable of being a positive role player even still, but yeah, he's just not enough. He wasn't hitting his threes. Defense isn't really scared of him. Not good. Jrue Holiday, gotta give him credit. Been great this whole playoffs for the most part. I have criticized him in a couple of games where he's been bad, especially because he has a tendency to be bad at the worst time, and especially be bad in the games that they end up losing. I really do feel like Jrue having good shooting is the X factor for their offense, and he has been shooting 40% from three for this entire playoffs, which my take here is that he was like, okay, I usually regress shooting wise in the playoffs by a pretty significant margin, like let's say 3 to 5%. What if let's just say I shot 43% from three in the regular season, so that way if I fall off and I shoot 3 to 4% worse, I'm still shooting 40% from three, baby. That's good. That's great. 28 points for him in this one, 4 for 8 from outside. That's 50%. I don't know if you knew that. Jaylen Brown, huge corner three. He had 26, 7, 5, and 4 stocks. It was a great Tatum game as well. And when I say that, his box score is whatever. Like for what Tatum's capable of scoring, he's fine. But he executed perfectly in the clutch. And that's the thing that I really worry about with Tatum, and I worry about with Boston, is their execution in the clutch. But yeah, as soon as they realized that switch was available, or rather that he could just dominate that with the 3 guards on the floor, they won the game from there. And I gotta give him credit for that.
Game two.
The first quarter ended with a 2-point lead for the Indiana Pacers, but I can't exactly say I felt great about them after this first quarter, because while of course they did lead leave with the lead, it was more because of Boston's mistakes than their own good job being done here. This was a great example of the sharing of the pie mentality that the Indiana Pacers had in this quarter, with 5 players scoring 4 or more points, including TJ McConnell having 7, which was the most of anyone in this first quarter. They left him wide open for 3, and that is the game plan, but ugly, slow jump shot or not, it did indeed go in. Can I also add how insane it is the lack of free throws that are being attempted in this series thus far? In this first quarter, both teams just attempted 2 free throws for each of them. That is extremely low, and it was extremely low in the overall first game of this series in total free throws, especially for Indiana. The Boston Celtics, of the 16 playoff teams this year, rank the bottom in fouls by a wide margin. They're averaging 5 less fouls per game than everybody else. And I know people like to argue that's like a bias from the refs, but to be honest, it's just kind of the way that they play defense, and that and in combination with the opponents that they've played not being guys who are necessarily the best at rim pressure. But Boston is not a very high free throw attempt team. They're not a very high, not really great at generating those either, but they're not as bad as Indiana is. So it's really a matter of 2 teams with similar weaknesses, but one of them just being a little bit weaker in it, and that being very self-evident. For Boston, Tatum struggled from the field. He shot 2 for 7, but the attempts that he was actually getting were good looks. Like, he had a lot of shots that he missed that I thought he could have made. And I'm more concerned for whether or not a player is having a bad game if they get to their spots with good looks or not. If that's happening consistently, more likely than not, if you're a really good player, the shot's going to start dropping. So I think the shot will start dropping for Tatum. But you pair the fact that Tatum is probably going to end up being fine after a rough start, and the shooting diet that the Pacers have just not being a lot of very high efficiency looks, well, I don't know, it kind of spells like inevitable disaster to me. Other than that, for Boston, Peyton Pritchard and Jrue Holiday hit a pair of threes, Jrue off of a pick and pop, Peyton off of a step back, and Jrue Holiday made a gorgeous play with PascWOW helping on him in the paint, which leaves Hali to split between Horford and Hauser. And when Haliburton turns his head, Hauser immediately cuts. Jrue jumped like he was going to be shooting it to get the defense to commit, and then made the perfect bounce pass. In the second quarter, we got a battle of the second options as Jaylen Brown had 17 points in the quarter on 5 for 11 shooting, and Pascal Siakam had 12 on 6 for 7 shooting. For Pascal, he could not miss from mid-range, hitting multiple post fades, like I'm pretty sure he hit like 3 consecutive. And for Jaylen Brown, it was a healthy mix of on-ball drives, including one where he used his left hand really well with his dribble, which is encouraging to see. He also hit a top-of-the-key step-back 3, an alley-oop from Jrue Holiday, and another great pass from Holiday, who got it from Tatum on the run on the fast break, and he had the ball for about half a second before he tipped it right back to Jaylen Brown cutting down the lane for the easy finger roll. Jrue has passed the ball super well through this game thus far, and he has 7 assists. He also shot 4 for 4 from the field and 2 for 2 from 3 in this quarter. He also shot 4 for 4 from the field and 2 for 2 from 3 in this half, also having 0 turnovers. So talk about efficiency, man. Indiana ended up drawing just 2 fouls yet again in this second quarter, actually just 1 foul, 2 free throw attempts, while the Celtics got 9, which isn't nothing crazy, but a 7 difference in disparity. It definitely does make a big difference, especially because they made more of their free throws. As a result of all of this, Indiana was down by 6 points going into the half, and in the third quarter, while they did end up improving some of their offensive approach and getting higher percentage looks, they actually got 6 free throw attempts, which is more than they had in the game in total, shot a little bit more threes. That didn't matter because Boston had one of the best, from an efficiency perspective, quarters that any team has had in these playoffs thus far, as they shot 73% from the field. Jaylen Brown's hot shooting continued, hitting a tough mid-range shot early, getting an and one on the break off of a steal, and he even had a really nice pass to a cutting O'Shea Brissett, who got a little bit of minutes in here off of his drive. Not often I'm highlighting a Jaylen Brown pass, but that was really textbook manipulation into the assist. It's crazy what kind of opportunities can open up if you just put some pressure on the basket. On Indiana's end of things, Miles Turner hit a big 3 at the top of the key when they otherwise had really nothing going for them. PascWOW continued to just not miss from mid-range, albeit on lesser volume. And Tyrese Haliburton had a whopping 2 points. 2 points. That's not good. And he would have none in the fourth quarter because I actually didn't quite see what happened, but I believe he re-aggravated his injury, and that's obviously going to make things much worse, although he hasn't necessarily been great in this game, so maybe him being off the floor is good. But on top of the fact that Jaylen Brown is on fire, Tyrese is out, you're down 13, you're not getting good looks going to the rim, you're not generating free throw attempts, you're losing the three-point volume and percentage battle, and Jason Tatum is perfectly good now. He had a really good third quarter shooting the ball, really not too scared anymore. Indiana is going to have to fundamentally change their approach going into the fourth quarter if they want any shot of winning this one, and realistically, it might just be too little too late. They did not end up changing anything. In fact, it felt like they conceded this one just a bit too early, honestly. They ended up playing Doug McDermott, which is a desperation move and a half if I've ever seen one. Derek White, who was hot in the third, did not miss in the fourth, no matter how ridiculous the shot. TJ McConnell made some weird mistakes in this one, including taking a short fadeaway instead of a layup when he had an open one available. He also threw a pass off of Isaiah Jackson to turn it over. And once Jarris Walker for the Pacers and Xavier Tillman for the Celtics checked in, I kind of checked out because it was very clear that Indiana was conceding here. All right, my key notes for the Boston Celtics. I would say this is a game where they looked much better pretty much the entire way through. I did not fear for this team winning this game pretty much from the onset. As I mentioned, that first quarter, Indiana won it, but pretty much from there, it looked obvious to me that Boston was just going to have it all the way through because unless there's just some dramatic momentum shift, it looked like they had a better game plan, a better approach, a better shot diet, and they're simply winning the math game. I do this spiel very often, and I have to emphasize that this is not anti-mid-range. It is simply pro understanding of the math of the game and pro having a versatile approach to your offense because they ended up, let's see what's the difference here. They shot more at the rim, they shot more at three, and they shot a lot more free throws by a wide margin. They took 8 more threes than the Pacers, they made 4 more of them, and they also shot 4 more free throws and made 6 more of them. It's going to be easy to win if Indiana is okay conceding this. And honestly, I have made this point a million times. It's kind of a common point that comes up in basketball discourse about mid-range shooting. I didn't realize how mid-range prevalent Indiana was because PascWOW loves them, Nembhard loves them, Aaron Nesmith finds any reason to take them. I do think you get a little bit of Tyrese Haliburton from there as well, but he's more of a three-point pull-up guy. They just like the mid-range shot. Miles Turner quite a bit. I didn't realize how prevalent it was until I'm actually seeing it now versus Boston, where Boston is a team that I'm generally critical of how one-note their offense can be, but this is especially a one-note offense for Indiana, and that's making it easier for Boston to defend them even without their marquee defender in Kristaps Porzingis. So yeah, it's going to be easy to win if that happens. Like, if you're not going to generate good looks and the other team's going to generate good looks and hit those shots when they get them while you don't hit those shots while you get them, well, I don't know if you knew how basketball works, but if you don't make your shots, you're not going to win. So not a good one for Indiana in that regard. Great game decision-making wise from Jaylen Brown. Obviously, everybody's going to look at the 40 points and the fact that that's like tying his playoff career high, and that's cool. Like, yeah, 40 points is nice. Highlight the 40 points. But frankly, what stood out to me from this one was his decision-making. I think he had 1 or 2 turnovers, did not turn it over much at all. Really strong drives, couple of good attacks on jump shots, hit some difficult shots here or there, maybe took a bad one here or there, but in general, good attempts, good decisions, better pizza Papa John's. I don't know. Rudy said he liked that one. Tatum was terrible in the first half, but he was great in the second, and obviously you don't want him to be bad in any quarter or any half, but if you're going to concede it, between 2 halves, choose the second one to be the one where you're better, where normally I feel like Tatum has done the exact opposite of that, where he starts a game hot, has a really good first, really good second quarter, something along those lines, maybe even a good third quarter, and then the fourth quarter is kind of where he bows out. But the third quarter, he was excellent in this one, which is where Boston got the real lead, and in the brief amount of time that he did play in the fourth quarter before the scrubs were subbed in, he played really well then too. Really, given how easily Tatum was getting to his spots, and given how good Boston was doing across the board in every other area of the game, seemed pretty evident to me that this was going to go exactly the way that it did. And all that it took was Jason Tatum finally finding his shot, which is exactly what happened. Jrue Holiday, 15 points, 10 assists on 6 for 7 shooting, 3 for 4 from 3. He was my pick to be the X factor for the Boston Celtics in this year's postseason run, and I can't say I'm surprised necessarily that he has played well. However, this has been a problem for Jrue, is playoff performance, which I was definitely, expecting this year for it not to be as bad just because he's lower in the pecking order, which A, puts less pressure on him from the defense because they're more focused on other players, and B, it also lowers the importance of him having a good game. So like, if you're the third best player and you have a terrible game, or especially the second best player and you have a terrible game like he was for the Celtics when Chris Middleton was dealing with injuries, when you have a bad game under those circumstances, is a lot more detrimental than if you take 8 shots and you miss 7 of them. It's a lot worse if you take 20 shots and you miss 15 of them. So from that point of view, Jrue Holiday, it's almost like he looked at his issue with like his percentages being bad. I think I made this point in the last one. I'm not going to say this twice. Indiana Pacers key notes. Remember what I said after game 1 about Haliburton and his aggressiveness being like determining whether or not Indiana has any level of shot in this one? Well, what do I really need to add in this one? 10 points, 2 in the third quarter. He was fine in the first half, like 8 points, good efficiency. I think like 6 or 7 assists. That's all cool, all good stuff. Glad you pulled that one off for sure. However, yeah, you needed him to be good this whole time. Now, an injury was a factor here. He got subbed out, obviously didn't play any of the fourth quarter. There was also a time in the game where he definitely strained it and was like grabbing his knee and looking like he might not quite be okay. I think he even got subbed out at the end of the first quarter for that reason. So I'm not going to go as hard on the paint as I did on him in the first one, just because, look, I don't know. You can't really know how much an injury is affecting a guy. All I know is I have seen him play good in spite of this, and they really need it to happen. Regardless of how critical you are of Tyrese, understanding the importance of his performance is kind of just undeniable. Another thing, remember what I said about game 1, about how appreciating how freaking good Pascal Siakam is? Like, holy shit, what a remarkable performance here. I can't believe how good he was in this one. Like, he genuinely had like, I don't know, 4 or 5 mid-range buckets in a row, and he kept getting to them so easily, and like none of them were that difficult of shots because he was just that smooth about getting into the look. Speaking of some mid-range shooting, Andrew Nembhard continues to get better and better as each game goes along, specifically as a shot creator. It's gotten to the point where like his mid-range game and him occasionally shooting a wing, a 3 specifically from that left wing, which is easily his favorite spot. He's almost always shooting from there. It's where he hit that really deep 3 in the Knicks series. But they're just relying on him more as an offensive creator. Hit a ton of really pretty mid-range shots in this one. Again, as I said after game 1, lots of things to like about Andrew Nembhard, and maybe just his potential's a little bit higher than we originally thought. Obi Toppin, relatively efficient, played well in his minutes. I suggested that Isaiah Jackson actually play a little bit more in this series in game 1, and then I guess Rick Carlisle watches the show even though this wasn't out when that happened, but we're just gonna make that the headcanon. But he did post a negative 12 and 16 minutes. So maybe I was wrong, Rick. Maybe you shouldn't listen to an NBA YouTuber, you fucking idiot. I just think you can't beat Boston really either way, and you especially can't if Boston has a healthier shot diet. Because frankly, if you're taking a look at the teams that have managed to beat Boston over the years, having a healthier shot diet is almost always the factor that wins them those series. It's like, yeah, Boston has a lot of talent. In the wrong moments, they can settle for the wrong shots. They can crack under pressure a lot better than most other contenders can. And they have shown that time and time again. But if you're not going to outshot diet them, they have no reason to be even a little bit concerned about your approach. The math of the game is on their side. And unless, Indiana just has some outlier shooting from mid-range, has some outlier shooting on the 3s that they do take, they're just not going to compete. Indiana is kind of bad at all the things that Boston's bad at, but they're worse. It's even worse in their case And I really just don't know if there is enough exploitable weaknesses for Boston here for them. I don't think they've even really tried to exploit weaknesses here. Like, for example, targeting Al or Pritchard in this one. They really didn't do that in this game. I think I saw a switch or two of Peyton Pritchard onto like Pascal Siakam in game 1. They were definitely trying to attack that. And Al Horford, the amount of times that Al Horford's hand went up in front of a shot that ended up going in game 1 was ridiculous. It might have happened 20 times. That's genuinely how many shots people hit over him. But they didn't do that in this one. They were not like trying to get him in drop coverage. They're not trying to attack him in the pick and roll. They're not trying to, you know, put Pascal beating him one-on-one because he's just way faster than him. None of that. Really, Pascal's fadeaways out of the post are the only thing that Al Horford had any issue with in this game, and that's just because they didn't really challenge him. So if I'm just looking at this series going forward, game 3 is going to be tonight, and it's in Indiana, so they have the home court. I don't know what the timeline on Tyrese Halliburton is. I didn't see any update on his injury. If he's out, that shit's done. So can you look that up? It looks like you're already doing it. Is he going to play game 3? Not getting a clear answer. Up in the air. Okay, we don't know if Tyrese is playing. If Tyrese is playing, we can go ahead and say GG to this series and just focus entirely on the Timberwolves Mavericks. But if that is not the case, I do think they have a chance to win one in Indiana. They have been more competitive with Boston than I honestly expected. That's kind of the thing that I fear with this commentary a bit, is that I'm coming off a little too negative about Indiana because ultimately they are doing better than I thought that they would. But also they've been doing better in a way that's like, okay, well, you're not too many steps behind doing so much better that you actually have a fucking chance here. But realistically, I just don't think anyone thinks this team can really hang. It sucks. So I wish we got a better conference finals matchup, to be honest, in this one, but at least we got another great one on the other end of things. But with that said, let's see how game 3 goes. I'm sure I'm going to talk about it, but that is it. Goodbye.